Välkomna alla till dagens pressträff här. Nobelförsamlingen vid Karolinska Institutet har idag beslutat att tilldela Nobelpriset i fysiologi eller medicin år 2015 med ena hälften gemensamt till William C. Campbell och Satoshi Ōmura för deras upptäckter rörande en ny terapi mot infektioner orsakade av parasitmaskar. Och den andra hälften till Youyou Tu för hennes upptäckter rörande en ny terapi mot malaria. The Nobel Assembly at the Karolinska Institute has today awarded the 2015 Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine, with one half jointly to William C. Campbell and Satoshi Ōmura for their discoveries concerning a novel therapy against infections caused by roundworm parasites, and the other half to Youyou Tu for her discoveries concerning a novel therapy against malaria. Die Nobelversammlung am Karolinska Institutet hat heute beschlossen, den Nobelpreis für Physiologie oder Medizin des Jahres 2015 zur Hälfte gemeinsam an William C. Campbell und Satoshi Ōmura für ihre Entdeckungen über eine neue Therapie gegen Infektionen verursacht durch parasitäre Würmer. Und zur Hälfte an Youyou Tu für ihre Entdeckungen über eine neue Therapie gegen Malaria zu verleihen. L'Assemblée Nobel, l'Institut Karolinska a décidé ce jour d'attribuer le prix Nobel de physiologie ou médecine 2015, pour moitié conjointement à William Campbell et Satoshi Ōmura pour les découvertes concernant un nouveau traitement contre les infections dues aux nématodes parasites, et pour moitié à Youyou Tu pour ses découvertes concernant un nouveau traitement contre la paludisme. Nobelevская ассамблея при Каролинском институте решила сегодня присудить Нобелевскую премию по физиологии или медицине за 2015 год. Одну половину равна William C. Campbell и Satoshi Ōmura за открытие новой терапии инфекций, вызываемых паразитическими червями. И вторую половину Youyou Tu за открытие новой терапии против малярии. So, with that introduction, I'll first show you the prize motivation in English, and then we proceed to the photos of this year's laureates. So from the left we have William C. Campbell, born in 1930 on Ireland, now Professor Emeritus at the Drew University, Madison, New Jersey, US. In the middle, Satoshi Ōmura, born 1935 in Japan, a scientist at the Kitasato Institute and now Professor Emeritus at the Kitasato University, Tokyo, Japan. And to the right, Youyou Tu, born in 1930 in China, trained in traditional Chinese medicine and now Chief Professor at the China Academy of Traditional Chinese Medicine in Beijing, China. And with that introduction, I will present our expert panel that will be available to answer questions in a little while. And we have Professor Jan Andersson, Professor Julien Sirat, Professor Hans Forsberg, all members of the Nobel Assembly, and Julien Sirat is also the chair of the Nobel Committee. And we will now provide a short description of the laureates, their work, their discoveries, and this presentation will be given to you by Professor Hans Forsberg. Please, Hans.
Thank you. So, parasitic diseases have plagued humankind throughout our existence. And still today, they affect hundreds of millions of the most vulnerable citizens of the world. The discoveries by William Campbell and Satoshi Ōmura have provided us with revolutionary therapies against elephantiasis and river blindness. And the discovery by Youyou Tu resulted in an exceptionally effective treatment against malaria. Elephantiasis is a stigmatizing and disabling disease of the lymphatic system that causes lifelong swelling of legs and other body parts. River blindness is due to infection and inflammation of the eye, damaging the cornea. Both diseases are caused by roundworm parasites that are transmitted by mosquitoes and flies to humans. In the human body, filaria, a form of the parasite, migrate to the lymphatic system, causing elephantiasis, or to the eyes, giving rise to river blindness. The life cycle of the parasite is maintained by new insects biting the human host and transmitting parasites to new persons. Satoshi Ōmura in Japan, a specialist in large-scale culturing and characterization of natural products, had a vision to find agents from nature that could be used to develop antibiotic drugs. He was particularly interested in the bacteria Streptomyces, which is very difficult to grow. He collected thousands of samples from soil, and against all odds, he succeeded in culturing several new species of Streptomyces. From these, he selected 50 of the most promising cultures to be evaluated for their antimicrobial activity. Amazingly, in one of these samples, collected next to a golf course, there was a new, not previously detected strain of Streptomyces that would change the history of medicine. Ōmura, as part of a collaboration, shipped the 50 cultures to Campbell's laboratory. There, extracts of the cultures were added to the food of mice infected with parasites. One of the extracts turned out to have a remarkable effect, killing all the roundworm parasites of the mouse. William Campbell, an expert in parasite biology working in USA, realized that they struck gold. He managed to purify the bioactive substance and named it ivermectin. Subsequently, the substance was modified to a more effective compound called ivermectin. The new drug turned out to be extremely effective against a range of parasites in farm and domestic animals, and it is today still massively used in veterinary medicine. Now, based on his success, Campbell wondered whether the spectacular effects seen in animals might be achievable also in humans infected with parasites. Clinical trials were initiated on patients with river blindness, and these could demonstrate that a single dose of the drug was sufficient to kill all roundworm parasites. The journey to develop a new drug against parasites that globally infect hundreds of million people had started. Like the previous diseases, malaria is caused by parasites transmitted by mosquitoes to humans. The infection leads to fever, shivering, sweating, and in severe cases to encephalitis and death. Globally, around 500,000 people, most of them children, die every year in malaria. After entering the human body, the parasites first infect liver cells. Thereafter, they enter red blood cells and multiply, destroying the cell, causing the recurrent fever attacks. The life of the parasite is maintained by new blood-sucking mosquitoes. To tackle the challenge of developing new malaria therapies, Youyou Tu in China, trained in pharmacy and part of a bigger national project, turned to traditional herbal medicine. In 1,000-year-old literature, she discovered that the plant Artemisia annua, sweet wormwood, appeared in hundreds of recipes. She therefore tested an extract from the plant on mice with malaria and found a clear effect on the parasites. But the results were inconsistent. Tu then decided to visit the ancient literature again. In a 1,700-year-old book, she discovered a recipe that inspired her to develop a new method to extract the active substance. It turned out to be a great success. 100% of the malaria parasites in infected mice and monkeys were killed. This was a genuine breakthrough in the discovery of artemisinin and a turning point in finding a new drug to combat malaria. The discoveries of ivermectin and artemisinin have fundamentally changed the treatment of parasitic diseases that affect hundreds of millions of the most vulnerable people living on our planet. Artemisinin saves lives of severely ill malaria-infected patients and has markedly reduced the death toll during the last decades. Ivermectin prevents the stigmatizing and disabling symptoms of river blindness and lymphatic filariasis by stopping parasites from infecting eyes and the lymphatic system. In combination with measures that interrupt transmission via insects, artemisinin and ivermectin have contributed dramatically to reduce the number of individuals that are infected every year. Treatment with ivermectin has even become so successful that river blindness and elephantiasis are on the verge of eradication. But the impact of ivermectin and artemisinin goes far beyond reducing the disease burden of individuals. By allowing children to go to school and adults to go to work, the treatment helps them to escape poverty, which also contributes to economic growth of the community. The discoveries of the 2015 year's Nobel laureates, William Campbell, Satoshi Ōmura, and Youyou Tu, represent a paradigm shift in medicine, which has not only provided revolutionary therapies for patients suffering from devastating parasitic diseases, but has also promoted well-being and prosperity for both individuals and society. The global impact of their discovery and the resulting benefit to mankind is immeasurable. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. And now we open for questions in Swedish or English. And we have a question on the second row. We get microphones also.
Where to?
Second row here.
Hello, Mr. Urban. I'm Yiming Fu from China's National Xinhua News Agency. Obviously, we're very happy for Chinese scientists to win this award this year. And can you give us some comments on the significance of Ms. Tu's role of incorporating China's herbal medicine into this treatment? Thank you.
I think this is a question that to John, for instance.
Yes. So it was well established even 1,700 years ago that this herb may have effects on fever. But what Youyou Tu did was discovering how to elucidate that herb, what part of that herb actually was the biologically active, and how to elute the biologically active substance out of that. And that was really a paradigm shift in medicine, allowing then for large-scale production and clinical trials after animal investigation had been performed.
I am Mahesh, I am from India. Does this also mean that the way Western science looks at ancient alternate medical systems is changing? Is that an acknowledgement?
So, Hans, there's the honor.
No, I think there are many sources to find ideas how to develop drugs. And I think you cannot neglect that there is a long experience finding out different plants, for example. So I think that can inspire us to develop new drugs. But I don't think we are going to use the old herbs as they are.
I'd like to add to that. They use very sophisticated methods to get the active compound from these natural products. So I wouldn't underestimate that at all. And they elucidated structures of these active agents as well. So it's not just a mix of plant, but it really is active compounds.
So what you're recognizing is the science of what you've done, and the ancient system of medicine is only an inspiration.
Exactly, I think that's a good way to put it. It was an inspiration, but then it was taken through all the procedures to really make a modern, very effective drug out of that.
I'm wondering about the production of artemisinin. I've heard about genetically modified organisms that are producing the substance. Is that the way it's produced today?
Yeah.
It's a semi-synthetic production, and it's still based on the conventional culturing and growth of the Artemisia.
Of the plant?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there is then added to it now, the synthetic part is a photoactivation step that is brought into it. And it's also brought into a way of concentrating by a method called HPLC and crystallization, allowing to get better concentration of the active compound, artemisinin.
There has been some talk about resistance to this drug. How great a problem is that?
Currently, there are, the last years, developed resistance in Southeast Asia. Nothing in Africa, as far as we know. In order to reduce the risk of contracting more resistance, it's combined with other drugs that has other mechanistic actions. But the importance with artemisinin is the very rapid onset in the early life cycle phase of the malaria replication. That's the groundbreaking event that has significantly reduced mortality in severe malaria. And that's really contributing the artemisinin effect.
But in the long run, how likely is it to be the parasite to be resistant to this compared to other drugs?
Historically, we have always, when we have developed antimicrobial substances, has the risks of resistance. And it's really a matter of how clever we are in using these in more and more combining efforts, and also separate out preventive measurements from true therapeutic. And in the sentence of artemisinin, we should use that for the severe cases where we have severe cases, and in that sense combine it with other drugs and then reduce the risk of resistance development.
I can just add to that. I think that is true. I think inevitably resistance will come up for all those, but it's also important to see what it has done for mankind up to this point. So I think we had a question in the front row here.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer with the People's Daily Chinese newspaper. And may I ask, how do you notice Youyou Tu about this good news, and what's reaction from her?
Actually, I should say we haven't been able to get hold of Youyou Tu yet, so we don't know the personal reaction, but I think for every country that is awarded the Nobel Prize, there would be a positive reaction. I would hope that would be the case this year as well. But it's Also, we do a very thorough work and go through all the literature, and we dig really deep into literature to really find every year the ones that have been made the most significant discoveries for mankind. And I mean, we've treated this case in the same way that we've done with everything before. So we go very deep into the sources.
My name is Xue Chen Axelsong, and I'm freelance for China Radio and also a reporter for Green Post. I'd like to ask young Anderson, can you tell us a little bit about how this Satoshi Ōmura and Youyou they cooperate? Do they cooperate closely, or how? Some stories behind this. Can you tell us?
How Youyou Tu and how Satoshi Ōmura, how they collaborate?
Mm.
I'm not.
We don't think that they do collaborate. So they've been working very independently.
Okay.
So I can say it this way. They both use biological sources which we call secondary metabolites. So the Streptomyces is a soil bacteria, 450 million years old, and it's induced to produce something very important in that settings, then a new antiparasitic compound. And it's the same thing for Artemisia. It's also a secondary metabolite from the herb that is done. So in that settings, they both understand that it's something very specific from a very specific grass that's able to elucidate. But they have not really collaborated in that
So
sense.
it's a very independent, separate discoveries
Right.
for the same purpose. Similar.
For two particularly complete different types of parasites, yes.
But it's important to emphasize that these are two different prizes that are given together. So one half is going to Youyou Tu, and the other half is going to William Campbell and Satoshi Ōmura. So there are two different parts of this prize.
One for worms and one for Protozoa plasmodium. It's completely two different sets of pathogens belonging to parasitic disorders.
Yes. So there are two different medications that have been developed from this year's research. What's the patent situation for those drugs?
You can comment on that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So currently there are not, to our knowledge, any patents that are up and running. So they are not under any patent protection as of yet. There are a number of companies that are producing these, and they are distributed, both these compounds are distributed throughout the world for those in need without costs. It's a very unusual situation that major industrial production partners have facilitated the use by letting these out free of costs to those that need.
What companies?
So, to our knowledge, Merck is a company that is the producer of ivermectin, and Sanofi Novartis of artemisinin. But there may well be more than which we are not well aware of.
So nobody has any patent?
Not to our knowledge right now.
And are there pending patents, as you know?
Not that we are aware of.
I mean, they're on the list of essential medicines, and so they're really available to government and people at need, and they're at prices that are reasonable. So they're really essential medicines.
Further questions? Okay. Are there any further questions? This is the moment. There is a question.
I'm sorry, I was very confusing. But again, about Youyou, can we say this is the first time you award the traditional Chinese medicine? And can you comment the contribution to this field?
Yeah, no, it's very important that we are not giving a prize to the traditional medicine. We are giving prize to a person who has been inspired by traditional means and who has been able to make a new drug that we can now distribute all over the world. That is what is the prize for. So it has inspired, but it's not the prize.
Can you comment on the contribution to this field by this medicine to you discovered?
Oh yeah. I can, or maybe Jan, I think you have the figures on top of your brain.
These two drugs are affecting the lives of 3.4 billion people living in endemic areas with the risk of contracting filariasis or river blindness or malaria. So that is the global situation. 100 nations are at risk of contracting that. There are now about 200 million people on a yearly basis getting ivermectin for prohibiting and trying to eradicate river blindness and elephantiasis. There is a vast program going on in WHO for reducing the numbers of infected countries with malaria as well. And a significant contribution has been done in halving the mortality in 13 years' time in malaria. It's a historically unique happening thanks to these two compounds developed by and identified, discovered by these three scientists.
Question in the back row, far up. The only thing I can say that we, as I said before, we investigate very deeply, very thoroughly, and of course there are means where we can also translate documents, and there is also subsequent literature in English also. But you're absolutely right. The first publications were in Chinese on the Artemisia annua. Okay, doesn't seem to be any further questions. So if not, then I thank you all for your attendance, and for those of you who requested interviews, there will be information on whom to talk to, and if there are additional ones that want interviews, please contact Anne-Marie Dumansky and we'll set it up for you. Thank you so much for attending.
sommarmalörten, som är den växten som Youyou Tu fann, producerar en unik substans som heter artemisin, som på ett fullständigt nydanande sätt dödar parasiter i den här som förhindrar att röda blodkroppar klumpar ihop sig och ger den skada. Detta i sin tur leder då till en helt ny överlevnad från absolut allvarligaste nivå. Malaria skördar varje år drygt 1,5 miljon liv. För bara 10 år så var det 1 miljon i synnerhet under 5-10 år. Så på 10 års tid är det halverat antal dödsfall. Vi räknar med att varje år nu 100 miljoner barn och 100 000 barn blir rädda från att dö i malaria. Vi har ungefär 200 miljoner malariafall. Hon läste gammal litteratur, och vad jag menar gammal litteratur var det första gången beskriven att den kinesiska valörten sänkte och tog bort feber redan 300 år före Kristus. 300 år efter Kristus kom sedan en annan publikation som hon hittade som sa att man ska extrahera det här i kyla och inte göra som man brukar göra, nämligen koka växter för att få ut protein. Och det ledde henne till att faktiskt göra om alla experiment.
Professor Julian Sira, Chair of the Nobel Committee, what discovery have you awarded this year?
So this year, the Nobel Assembly has awarded the 2015 Nobel Prize to William C. Campbell and Satoshi Ōmura for their discoveries concerning a novel therapy against infections caused by roundworm parasites. And that's jointly. And the other half is to Youyou for her discoveries concerning a novel therapy against malaria.
I was at a press conference and it was a bit quiet. It seemed like people were not expecting this prize. Why is that?
Well, probably, as you know, the Nobel Assembly and Nobel Committee, we keep most of our work very secret. And so for me, as chair of the committee, I'm always quite pleased when people are surprised. It means we've done our work well. And every year we get between 300 and 400 individuals nominated. And so in some ways, it'd be very difficult to almost guess who the laureate might be with that many individuals nominated each year. So I think I'm pretty happy that it was a surprise.
The Will of Arthur Nobel stated that the prizes should be awarded to those who have conferred the greatest benefit on mankind. So how does this prize fulfill this criterion?
Well, I think these two discoveries are a really good example of conferring the greatest benefit to mankind, because both of these discoveries have led to therapies that are against parasites. So Campbell and Ōmura, their discoveries have led to drugs that are used now to treat roundworm infections. And this is causing diseases like elephantiasis and river blindness. Those two diseases are really debilitating. People have lifelong suffering because of those diseases. And this drug therapy now can reduce the disease. Youyou Tu's discoveries have led to drugs against the malaria parasite. And that has also saved the lives of millions of individuals. So within the idea of Nobel, I think we have examples here that have conferred the greatest benefit to mankind. You know, these therapies, they save lives, they prevent disability, and they prevent the spread of infection, and they also improve the life well-being of individuals and economic growth. So I think this is a great example. Nobel would have been happy.
And why was the prize awarded now? Why this year?
Why this year? Mm-hmm. Well, you know, every single year we start with a new plate, and the committee and the assembly have been working very hard, going through the nominations, and we came to the conclusion that this was the best, you know, constellation, the best prize this year, and that's why we're here to talk about these laureates.
What are the key breakthroughs that make these laureates worthy of the Nobel Prize? I mean, who did what?
Who did what? So you have to think of it as two parts. So Ōmura was working in Japan, and he was really interested in identifying microbial antibiotics. So he went to soil, and he had a hypothesis that he would be able to collect soil samples, and they would have bacteria that would ward off infection. And so he collected soil samples and cultured them in his laboratory, and he looked for samples that had unusual properties. And then he selected from thousands of cultures, about 50 of these samples, that he set on, and Campbell could take these samples and give them to animals, to mice. They took lyophilized broths from these samples, mixed them in the food of mice, and they could find that they had anti-parasitic effects. They could kill parasites in mice. Campbell also took these compounds and he tested them in livestock, in farm animals, in cattle, poultry, domestic animals, dogs, and he could show that these compounds could kill roundworm parasites. He also, Campbell, could show that there was durability, that one dose of this compound was sufficient to kill parasites for up to a year. These experiments, or these discoveries, led to the clinical development of a drug called ivermectin, and that was used later to be able to treat people who had river blindness. Youyou Tu, she was part of a larger project. The project had probably little progress, but she came on the scene. She took the challenge of turning to traditional Chinese medicine, and she was surveying different plants for their active compounds against malaria. And she identified one plant, Artemisia anu, that was effective against killing the malaria parasite. But initially her results were mixed. So she went back to very ancient Chinese literature, 1,700-year-old literature, and she got clues on how to refine and work with her extraction procedures. And from that, she was able to identify an extract that was 100% efficient in killing the malaria parasite. She then went on and tested that in monkeys and later in humans.
So was this considered a breakthrough at the time when those findings were presented, sort of?
I think that they were, because they were so efficacious. So they were seen as a breakthrough. Now, admittedly, the work of Youyou Tu was largely seen in China, and that really came to the Western world some years later. But it was clear that both of these compounds, ivermectin first with Campbell and artemisinin with Youyou Tu, were seen to be very effective in killing parasites. One was killing roundworm parasites, the other one the malaria parasite.
Since there are a lot of young people watching right now, how will you explain in an easy way to the importance of this prize to a grade school student?
I take it down to the grade school level. You can imagine that if you are going to go on an African safari, you're going to go to the tropical regions of the world where these parasite infections are very prevalent. You would take along your mosquito net, you take along your bug sprays, but you may still get bit by a fly or a mosquito that might transfer either the roundworm parasite or the malaria parasite to you. If that would happen, you would become very ill. Because of these drugs, we now have therapies that kill these parasites very early in their life cycle. They not only kill these parasites, but they stop these infections from spreading. So it's one way to kill the parasite, another way to stop it from infecting other people.
Now, if we turn our attention to laureates, who are they?
Okay, so Satoshi Ōmura is still active. He's working in Japan. He's a microbiologist, and he really had a long history in working with soil samples and bacteria and trying to identify active compounds from bacteria that could be efficacious. He's still active as a scientist today. William Campbell, he's a parasitologist. He's retired. He's less active scientifically, but he had a long-standing career working towards developing antibiotics for the livestock industry and was really instrumental in taking these therapies towards the clinic with his other collaborators. Youyou Tu, again, I believe she's retired, but she's in Beijing, China, at the China Traditional Medicine Academy, and had worked for many, many years utilizing traditional Chinese medicine.
And finally, has the Nobel Committee been able to reach any of the laureates?
So Urban has been successful in contacting Dr. Ōmura this morning. He was delighted, and he was very pleased to be awarded the prize together with William Campbell. He thinks he's a very nice person. He's really excited about this joint award. We have not been in contact with William Campbell, nor have we had contact with Youyou Tu.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.